My name is Nick from the UBC Students for Freedom of Expression. Today we are joined by Jenn Smith, a transgender political activist and public speaker, very controversial. Last month, we interviewed Morgane Oger. Today we would like to give the opportunity to Jenn Smith to rebut or discuss some of the comments Morgane Oger made about him in particular, and also some of the recent controversies that have happened regarding Jenn Smith's events. So Jenn, it's good to have you. We're going to play the first clip from the Morgane Oger interview and see how you react to it.
Right, so can I just say that I appreciate having this opportunity to be here, because I do feel that some of the comments that Morgane made about me were highly defamatory and disparaging to myself as a person. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here to offer my rebuttal. So yeah, what we're going to do is maybe give the debate that never happened.
The debate that never happened.
Right, so yeah, you can go ahead.
Would you be interested in coming back and talking to Jenn Smith?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I'm concerned about Jenn Smith's well-being.
Okay.
And I have no interest in dealing with people who are unwell.
So, Jenn, are you unwell? Should I be concerned about your mental well-being?
Okay, so yeah, it's interesting. So Oger's stated reason, and we'll get into maybe what the real reasons are, but his stated reason for not debating me is that I am unwell. Coming from somebody who is the vice president of the NDP in British Columbia, I find that to be a very disturbing statement. Yes, I have talked about the fact that I've had mental health issues in my life because I was a foster child. I went through 6 homes as a kid at a very young age. I was traumatized, physically abused, and most kids who go through experiences like that will experience permanent, in some cases, in other cases, like very serious trauma, right? So I carried some of that with me throughout my life. So I've talked about that. And I talk about that in my public talks as well, and it gets me a lot of flack from the other side that I talk about mental health issues in the transgender community. But it's something that's very real, and it's not my opinion. It's documented in the science that there are above average rates of mental health issues in the transgender community. So I do talk about that in my public talks. However, unlike Morgane Oger, as we just saw there, I do not stigmatize people who have mental health issues or are struggling with mental health conditions. Just because someone has experienced some sort of trauma and has a mental health condition doesn't mean that they are incoherent and unable to contribute to society in a meaningful way. So some of the greatest people in human history were people who had mental health issues, like Vincent van Gogh. My favorite science fiction writer, Philip K. Dick, is well known to have had mental health issues. Much like myself, he had tendencies to get into powerful existential depressions, and I do that myself. Philip K. Dick, incidentally, tried to kill himself in Vancouver, and I think it was 1973. But to say that because Philip K. Dick had these mental health challenges, right, that he couldn't contribute to society is absurd. Right? He was one of the great minds of the 20th century. So I find it very unsettling that Morgane Oger would say that he wants nothing to do with anybody who's unwell. He's probably in the wrong line of work. And I'm going to apologize here if people find my use of pronouns offensive. We'll address the pronoun issue shortly. But in the transgender community, there are a lot of mental health issues, and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed sensitively. And if Morgane Oger can't deal with unwell people, probably needs to look for a new line of work.
All right, next clip.
I have no interest in dealing with people who are unwell. But, you know,
that was the major
Megan
comment.
Murphy, if, always happy to speak with her if she wants. The invitation's been out there for some time.
Interesting.
And
okay.
I think you're friends with Lindsay Shepherd, or you keep on quoting her, or you all do. She'd be an interesting conversation. I'd like to limit myself to people who are coherent and make sense and put together an argument that makes sense.
So Morgane Oger had suggested that she would rather and be okay with interviewing Megan Murphy or potentially Lindsay Shepherd. Mm-hmm. So what distinguishes those two women from you?
Right, so this gets into what I would call the real reasons why Morgane Oger refuses to debate me. I think that during the course of this interview, people will be able to decide for themselves whether or not I'm able to construct coherent arguments and intelligible arguments for people. I'm going to suggest that the fact that I'm unwell is not the reason that Morgane will not debate me. The reason Morgane won't debate me, I would suggest, is because, let's see, what am I looking for here? I would probably bury him in a debate. The reason that he's willing to debate, say, Lindsay Shepherd. Now, Lindsay Shepherd is relatively new to this debate, so her breadth of knowledge on the subject is very limited, so he doesn't feel threatened by Lindsay Shepherd. Lindsay Shepherd is also part of what I call the Toronto cabal, so that's the National Post gang, so Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Kay, Lindsay Shepherd, there's a whole bunch over there. But they have a much narrower range of debate than I do. And if we look at Megan Murphy, okay, so Megan is very smart, she's very educated, but again, she's got a very narrow range of debate. Okay, she focuses almost exclusively on women's issues and issues related to women's privacy and rights and stuff like that. And that's fine, right? That's fine for her to focus on that, and she's very good at doing that. But she doesn't get into some of the broader issues that I get into. So I get into pharmaceutical conflicts of interest and corruption in terms of transgender science, and I get into SOGI 1, 2, 3, and things like this. And these are areas that Oger doesn't want to get into because he'd rather the public doesn't get access to that information. Can I just spend a minute talking about Megan Murphy? Because recently it's been suggested that I don't support Megan Murphy.
Okay. Yeah.
That is not true. Okay, so I have supported Megan Murphy regularly over the years that I've been in this debate. When she was thrown off of Twitter for saying that men aren't women, I was right there, sort of supporting, talking about how it was an outrage. I went to her talk at the Vancouver Public Library. I've supported Megan Murphy all along. So what we have going on right now, and people are talking about this, is not that I don't support Megan Murphy. It's more the other way around. Megan Murphy doesn't support me. Okay, so if you go to the Feminist Current website, for instance, and you do an exact search for Jenn Smith, you will get a total 0 returns. Okay, the same thing with SOGI 1, 2, 3. So we talked about what Morgane wants to debate. So you go to the Feminist Current and you type in SOGI 1, 2, 3, you'll get 0 returns. So even when I was under assault and the whole media was talking about me being censored and people trying to stop me from being able to speak at UBC, and Megan Murphy came out and wrote an article on freedom of speech, she refused to even acknowledge my existence. Okay, so in that instance, I want people to understand that it's not I who does not support Megan Murphy, it's Megan Murphy who doesn't support me. But again, in terms of who Morgane is willing to debate, it's because he wants to keep the debate as narrow as possible.
We do not allow the targeting of community members. That's all there is to it. We can talk about the esoterics, the theory of gender. Sure, that's great. Good stuff. But some random person who comes in who talks about chemtrails and conspiracy theories, who's hunting around in my past because he's convinced I'm a secret agent for the Americans. I mean, really? This is the standard of the University of British Columbia?
So, Jenn, is Morgane Oger a secret agent, and do you believe in chemtrails?
Okay, so there's a few things there. So one thing you'll find in my criticisms, and Oger talked about this in his interview with you, is that in his opinion, I defame his character. I don't defame Morgane's character. I point out things that Morgane says and does. What you will never see in my criticisms of Morgane Oger is me fabricating things. So I don't say Morgane Oger talks about shape-shifting aliens ruling the world. I don't do that, okay? I have never talked about chemtrails. Never in my life. Like everyone sort of heard about them and stuff, so I'm aware that there's a theory out there, but I never talk about them. So why is Morgane, putting out this idea that I talk about chemtrails? Okay. Now the conspiracy theories thing is interesting because typically one of the things that they will refer to on the other side of this debate as a conspiracy theory that I engage in is the fact that I focus on conflicts of interest in transgender science with the pharmaceutical industry, right? And Morgane has said to me that this is a conspiracy theory. There's no way that these corporations would be trying to turn kids into lifelong pharmaceutical company or customers and make $1 billion. They would never do that. That's a conspiracy theory, right? Okay, well, I don't regard that as a kooky conspiracy theory. And I would suggest that anybody who trusts the pharmaceutical complex to be honest and have integrity all the time is out of their minds.
It's just the whole notion of when you say Big Pharma, immediately you'll be lumped in with people who do engage in conspiratorial sort of rhetoric.
Well, I would say that that is an argument that's out there in the general public deliberately. Okay, so it's used as a way of shaming people basically and saying anybody who questions this is a conspiracy kook. But if like you were at my talk, and you'll know that when I talk about Big Pharma involvement in transgender science, I provide actual evidence, right? I don't just sort of, oh, they're out to get us. I provide actual evidence. Now, the one thing that he said there that's worth mentioning, so he says that Jenn says that I'm a secret agent for the Americans. So I'll address where that came from. Okay, so during my time in this debate, I have obviously made a lot of connections around the globe, really, okay, with people involved in this debate. A while ago, somebody in Chicago contacted me and said that Morgane Oger was recruited by the Central Intelligence Agency. And part of that, the argument that they were giving me is that Morgane Oger actually did information for RAWA. I forget the acronym there, but it's an Afghani group of women who are opposed to sort of Muslim ideology, I guess, in Afghanistan. And he actually did information for them. And they were suggesting that this was part of, and again, this is an allegation, right? That Morgane was at that time recruited as part of Central Intelligence Agency activities. Now, Morgane Oger says so many things that are so patently absurd and so outrageous, and does things like getting the Vancouver rape relief defunded, that seems almost like it's deliberately intended to drive people into a frenzy, that you have to kind of wonder, okay, so is Morgane doing this deliberately? So when this person came to me with this allegation about Morgane Oger, it didn't seem crazy to me. So what I did, and what some other people did, is we went to Morgane Oger and we said, Morgane, have you ever signed a national security agreement either in the United States or in Canada? Now, how Morgane responded to this has been interesting, because he's been asked a half dozen times. And Morgane Oger has thus far refused to answer the question. Okay? He refuses to say either yes or no. Now, those who have studied intelligence like I have will know that there's something in intelligence circles known as the Glomar response. Okay, this is basically I neither confirm nor deny. Say anything but yes or no. And this is all we've gotten out of Morgane Oger. So I am not saying that Morgane Oger is a secret agent. I'm saying that there is a suspicion out there among people that Oger may be under an intelligence agreement. Now, if I was Morgane Oger and somebody came to me and accused me of having, been recruited by the CIA or something, I would say, no, I've never signed a national security agreement in the United States or Canada, and that would be the end of it. So people need to ask, okay, so why is it that Morgane refuses to answer this question? Okay, so I don't know if he is or not, but there is a reason for suspicion.
And people make a gigantic circus about silly things like pronouns, right?
Or SFE about pronouns.
Pronouns, or there's all kinds of things like this. Like, oh God, I can't possibly be, a decent human being and call you the name you'd like to be called, because that's an infringement on my human rights.
So, are concerns over pronouns as frivolous as was discussed?
Okay, so Morgane Oger and people on Morgane's side of the debate regularly want to suggest that referring to a transgender, someone like Morgane, using she or her, is just being a decent human being, right? And why can't you just be a decent human being? Because this is just, it's trivial for you to refuse to do that. I would suggest that it's not a trivial issue. Okay, so I've been in this debate now going on 2 or 3 years, and from almost day one, it became apparent to me, abundantly apparent to me, that language was being used as a psychological and political weapon to condition people and to bludgeon them into submission to transgender ideology. Okay, so it is not a mere trifle. So the reason that you sort of understand that it's important, and let me just say that in terms of an act of respect, the act of respect that I give to Morgane Oger is that Morgane has adopted the name Morgane, okay? Just like I've adopted the name Jenn. So I, out of respect, will agree to use Morgane, Okay, that's a respect. I don't use Morgane's male name, right? That would be sort of like referring to Muhammad Ali as Cassius. Like, why would you do that? There's no point in doing that. So I show Morgane respect by doing that. But when Morgane says that I must refer to Morgane as a woman and as a she and as a her, that's a big ask. Okay, that's asking me to basically reprogram my brain and surrender physical reality. But it gets even more insidious than that. So, for instance, Jennifer Bielek, who writes for the Federalist in the United States, who's a friend of mine, she's described language or compared language to street signs. Okay, so important street signs have to mean the same thing to everybody all the time. If they don't, you're going to get chaos, right? So I would say that language is the same thing. Now, Jordan Peterson is frequently portrayed as a great hero for common sense against transgender madness. I don't see Jordan Peterson that way. Jordan Peterson entered this debate basically attacking what he called fake pronouns, okay, zer, ze. I actually don't have a problem with these, okay, so if we sort of, and I should say that Jordan Peterson is more than willing. And we saw this with Theron Meyer. I don't know if you know who Theron Meyer is, but Theron Meyer is a male who identifies as a woman. And Jordan Peterson was more than happy, almost gleeful, to refer to Theron Meyer as a she and a her, and conceded that she could use the word woman. But Peterson basically slammed his fist on the table in one interview and said, "I will not use your damn fake pronouns," right? But the problem is that if we accept what Jordan is saying there, then all we have on the table is she and he, okay? And that's a problem, okay? So if the word she does not, as a pronoun, does not refer to a female, then what pronoun does? Okay, there is no pronoun then. So the transgender activist movement likes to say that people are trying to erase their existence. I would say it's the other way around. Because they are seizing the language that used to like solely identify females, they are erasing biological women from our language, and this is a serious issue. It's also kind of what I call a neurolinguistic game that they're playing, because what happens is that when you refer to a male using female identifiers like she and stuff, you're opening up areas of the brain previously reserved exclusively for females, right? It's kind of like the neurological equivalent of opening up women's change rooms to men, right? So it's a kind of like almost a deep magic thing, like deep psychology that's going on. So I resist that as well. But George Orwell talked about the fact that, and I'm spending a little time on this because this is important, right? So George Orwell talked about the fact that if you look at decaying societies, one of the things you'll see is a decay in the language, because language naturally expands to include new things. So, 20 years ago, texting was a nonsense word. So Jordan Peterson and some of his followers say, well, zer is a nonsense word. Well, half of our language was a nonsense word at some time. As new things are introduced, we create new words to identify them and clarify them. If we get into a situation where a language starts contracting and becoming less clear, that's a bad thing, and that's what we see happening in this particular instance. Now, in terms of, again, back to Orwell again, he suggested that if you could, in a society, get enough control of language and manipulate language enough, you could actually maneuver society into a state where people would not be able to describe their own oppression. Okay, and the best example I have of this is a radio interview I did with Carleen Nation in Toronto, actually Mississauga, I think it was. She's a former CBC reporter, and I was on her radio show, and we were talking about the Jessica Yaniv case, right? And I was trying to explain in the course of that interview why this was such an outrage. And I said, well, here you've got a group of women who provide women-only services, intimate women-only services for waxing and stuff. And Jessica Yaniv comes along, who's male, and he's basically trying to use the law to force these women to provide waxing services around his genitals. At that point in the interview, Carleen stopped me and said, no, it's her. Okay, I identify Yaniv as a woman and as a her and as a she. Okay, so if I agree at that point, okay, and if I say, okay, I know that Yaniv is male, but you say I have to use the she and her and stuff, rework that sentence. Okay, so here we have a male who's trying to force these women to perform waxing around, not his, but her genitals. You've just taken away the ability to describe the outrage that is happening. See, and that's what Orwell talked about. We saw some of the stuff that's going on in terms of pronouns at the Megan Murphy event that you went to at the Crystal Pavilion at the Pan Pacific, or whatever that is, when Jonathan Kay responded to Morgane Oger, and I think you were sitting next to Morgane. You weren't there on the date, were you? No, okay. Right. So Morgane Oger got up and spoke, and Jonathan Kay started off by saluting, saying, "I salute you, Morgane Oger," which I was like, here's this person who's been trampling women's rights left, right, and center and engaging in all of these outrages, and he's in a room full of women who are not fans of that type of thing, and he's saluting Morgane. But we'll put that aside. But then he started surrendering the language to Morgane, saying, she and her, and got into like a debate with, well, this is an act of respect, exactly what Morgane is talking about. And then some of the women in the room sort of spoke up and went, it's a he, it's a him, it's his, and they were quite angry. And Jonathan Kay tried to use social shaming to get them into line, saying, well, you need to just be respectful. You're not going to get anywhere by being disrespectful. But that's, again, this is that social shaming thing where they're trying to force people into surrendering language that I think I've been able to illustrate here is more than just a trifle. It's important. Language helps us organize and understand our world, and we have specific pronouns for females, and those need to stay in place, and that's why I'm a stickler for correct use of pronouns.
Right. You had said that you are not opposed to gender-neutral pronouns being used. Now, the basis behind that is it is gender identity.
Right.
The basis of that pronoun being gender identity. Isn't the reframing of he and she, being based on gender identity rather than biology or sexual origins of genitalia? Isn't that sort of, if you concede that there are gender neutral pronouns, are you not then conceding that gender identity could be the basis of he or she?
Okay, so gender, this is a new thing, okay? So you go back to 100 years, we weren't dealing with this issue, okay? So again, we need to sort of, and I'm always talking about this, we need to distinguish a difference between gender and sex, okay? So I would say she, her, these are references to somebody's sex, not to their gender, okay? Now, people are making a big deal about pronouns. Like, I kind of agree with Boy George, who recently said, be more than a pronoun, right? And I agree with that. So I get called every pronoun in the book. I get called he, she, hers. I've been called everything. It doesn't, I don't care. It doesn't bother me, right? But because we've got some people saying it's an offense to, say, refer to Theron Meyer as he, okay, well, we don't want to, as I already mentioned, get into this destruction of our language by removing words. Like, if you remove she, you don't have a pronoun specifically for females anymore. Okay, so we don't do that. So I would say, okay, well, let's come up with a new pronoun. Jordan Peterson would have you believe that it's going to be 200 different pronouns that we have to use, and it'll be impossible. No, you don't have to. You can have like a set of 2 or 3 for each transgender expression, like in terms of, M to F, male, masculine to feminine, transgender, or the other way around. So you don't need maybe more than 3 to 6 pronouns that will be respectful to transgender people and not erase women at the same time.
I very much recognize that the pursuit of truth and the creation of creativity should be pursued, right? But not by any means, right?
I see.
And not as disinformation. Providing disinformation as under the guise of the pursuit of truth is not the pursuit of truth.
So, Jen, are you spreading disinformation, and what makes Morgane Oger say that you are spreading misinformation?
Well, that's the $20,000, what they used to call the $20,000 question. It's much more now with inflation. But, so I'm not going to try to prove a negative. Okay, so I keep telling Morgane and other people on their side of the debate that they need to come to me and prove that I am spreading disinformation and lies, but they don't. They can never seem to do this. The best that they can do is take something that I've said and totally misrepresent what I've said, like my talks about mental health issues, which I think are important, especially when we're talking about children. I don't say that all transgender people are mentally ill, yet they claim that I do, right? So that's how they sort of distort things. I don't do that. What I find interesting about that and instructive about that comment from Morgane Oger is that Morgane has set a standard here about, you shouldn't be listening to people that spread disinformation, and they need to be honest. Well, let's take a look at and see if Morgane lives up to those standards himself.
And then later on, the day or 2 days before this event, when Jenn Smith used iconography that was associated with the alt-right and with violence, and when she mentioned that she was going to come in with her Soldiers of Odin friends, who are, after all, a violent hate group.
Did she say that she was going to come with Soldiers of Odin?
So let's just address the accusation that you've used alt-right iconography, and let's just further describe your supposed relationship with the Soldiers of Odin.
Okay, well, there's actually a few clips that we have that Oger addresses this issue, so we'll kind of go through those different clips. Just specifically to what Oger has said there, I have never said, that's an outright lie, I have never said that I'm coming with my Soldiers of Odin friends to any event, and I challenge anybody to show where I've ever done that. Right? In terms of the iconography that Morgane is talking about, when I first heard Morgane say that, I was like, okay, what is he talking about? And best as I can tell, is that there is out there on social media, there's this meme, this green frog-like character.
So did you, in fact, post a photo of Pepe?
A bunch of trans activists were saying they were going to shut down my event, and they were hurling insults at me, and I said, you guys are a bunch of clowns, and I sent them a picture of this green frog character that I thought was funny. Now, I didn't know that this is apparently some sort of racist thing.
Oh, no. If I had known that it was Pepe the frog, that's been a very contentious and a strange sort of permutation of a very common, well-used online internet meme. Mm-hmm. So,
Doesn't Jordan Peterson say that he relates to Pepe or something?
Yeah, he does. It's I think there's been tons and tons of cases. I think did the Anti-Defamation League rule that Pepe was a alt-right meme? That's just like, it's hard to suggest that. I think you're kind of off the hook, effectively. I don't think that's really an alt-right dog whistle, as Morgane was trying to say. If I had known that was the meme.
That's as best I can tell. That is what Morgane is talking about, because people sort of jumped on me right away saying that.
I thought it might have been perhaps your cross or something like that. Like that might have been
cross is now an alt-right meme.
I suppose so. If Pepe is.
But no, I'm pretty sure that that's what Morgane was talking about. And like I say, to me, it was an amusing image that said to the people, "You're a bunch of clowns."
Right. So let's go into that second clip that you had mentioned.
And when she mentioned that she was going to come in with her Soldiers of Odin friends, who are, after all, a violent hate group.
Did she say that she was going to come with Soldiers of Odin? Because Jenn Smith explicitly denies association with Soldiers of Odin.
Jenn Smith denies association with Soldiers of Odin, yet is permanently guarded by them when she's at an event, it seems. I have never seen Jenn Smith speak at an event that didn't have Soldiers of Odin providing security. I don't know what to tell you, but the extreme right and Jenn Smith are always together, always hanging out with each other at public events, crapping on trans people.
Okay, so
yeah, let's get right into that, because I took some issue with that sort of association. My response to that immediately was, well, as soon as you have far left, more militant actors coming to your events, as has happened at UBC, immediately you will get far right people coming to and being attracted by the grouping of those people. It's almost like a reaction that comes from what I would call like a street militia versus another street militia, as it were. So, I mean, that's what's happened at our events on some occasions. I'm sure I remember that happened at your event. You know, does that really imply that you are associated or in line with the Soldiers of Odin?
Well, yeah, I'll offer sort of a rebuttal along those lines momentarily when we get into another clip. But the thing about what Morgane is saying there is it's patently false. Okay, so I'm continuously guarded by the Soldiers of Odin. Okay, so let's break this down. The Soldiers of Odin, I'm going to use plural for now, as far as I know, have attended 3 of my events. Okay, I've done talks all over British Columbia. I've done talks in Kelowna and Ashton and Campbell River and Victoria. I've done so many talks I can't even count them anymore. And like at the vast majority of them, there were no Soldiers of Odin. Okay, so 3 that I'm aware of. I did a rally in Victoria where they came because they were concerned that it was going to get out of control. When people who are familiar with the Oak Bay event that I was involved in, this huge sort of chaotic situation where there were 400 protesters who got into my talk and basically, went wild. The Soldiers of Odin came to that as well. That is the only event that I've done where I'm aware, or I believe, that more than one Soldier of Odin showed up. Okay, there was a group of 4 of them waiting for me when I got there, and I would like to say, like, I am grateful that they were there, because I was told before I went to Oak Bay that I was told by the mayor of Oak Bay that they knew that there was this huge mob that was going to be coming to protest me, right? And he said that I could count on there being police there. When I got there, there was not a single uniformed police officer, not a single one. All that was waiting there were these 4 Soldiers of Odin, right? Conrad Peach. The only one I recognized actually as a Soldier of Odin was Conrad Peach, and he said, look, there's this huge mob there. It's probably a good idea if we walk you in, right? So I allowed them to walk me in, and they came into the event where it was chaos inside, total chaos inside, and all they did when they got inside was they stood at the front of the room and they tried to keep order, keep people away from me. Had they not been there, my $1,100 projector would have been destroyed. Somebody grabbed it by the cord and tried to yank it onto the floor. A Soldier of Odin caught it and put it back on the table and then chased people away. So had they not been there, who knows what would have happened, okay? So I can only judge people based on, what they say and what they do. I don't like to judge people based on what other people say, right? So in that particular case, I'm grateful they were there. But that is the only case that I'm aware of where the Soldiers of Odin came as a group to my event. And they came without their colors, incidentally, too. So they don't wear their colors. Because I've talked to Conrad Peach before, and I said, listen, if you want to go to my events or whatever, I can't tell you not to go. But I'm asking as a favor that you not wear your colors, because I want this to be about the women and the children that I'm trying to defend in my talks and stuff. And I don't want to bring in, a bunch of symbols of other groups and stuff. So if you do come, please don't wear your colors. And the 3 events that I know that Conrad Peach has been to, he's been to 2 by himself, and then that one at Oak Bay, and in no instance did they wear Soldiers of Odin colors.
Right. Okay. Next clip.
Oh, wait. Okay, so just one more thing. Okay, so he says there that he's unaware of any instance where Jenn Smith has talked where the Soldiers of Odin weren't present, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's a lie. Okay, so I did an event in Chilliwack, which is basically a tribute to Barry Neufeld, who's this school trustee who's stood up for parental rights and stuff in Chilliwack, and I was a speaker there. And Morgane was there at that event.
Oh.
And there were no Soldiers of Odin at that event. And I would challenge Morgane to prove otherwise. So Morgane knows darn well that there are events where the Soldiers of Odin have not been present. But he's just, okay, so he's set this standard about disinformation and stuff, okay? Well, what is Morgane doing here, right? He's deliberately putting out misinformation, deliberately, in my opinion, lying. So what does that say about Morgane? So we can go on.
When people ask me, do you support someone stapling a rat to a rape crisis center's window, I say, this is abhorrent behavior, right? That's how you say, I don't support this. When, Jenn Smith, and I'm getting a little, we've spoken about this person maybe too much, but Jenn Smith has had ample opportunity to make a statement that says, I do not want white supremacist hate group people to provide me security. I don't need them, and I reject their being at my side. Yet instead, Jenn Smith continuously shows up with them, knowing they're coming, and then says, "Oh, I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. They're free to be here too." I don't know what to tell you there. We all have agency, and we all have the right to say, "I don't want this person next to me."
Okay, we all have agency there. That's interesting. If you can maybe open up the image file there, that's up. Okay, so people will see this image. What this image is the evil Comrade Peach. Okay, this evil figure that Morgane talks about, and who's behind Conrad there? Well, that is Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP in Canada, giving Conrad Peach, who is wearing a Soldiers of Odin hat, incidentally, giving Conrad the thumbs up. Okay, so using Morgane's logic, right? Okay, so obviously this climate rally there was actually something equivalent to the Nuremberg rally, because Conrad was there and Jagmeet is obviously in on this Nazi rally that took place in front of the legislature in Victoria, right?
Right.
Of course, that's an absurd argument.
So here's the thing. So they're using guilt by association, like
right.
But let's make it super clear. That she wants Morgane wants you to denounce association with the Soldiers of Odin. Would you denounce publicly, white supremacy, white nationalism,
Okay. Yeah, that's the next thing. Okay, so when Morgane Oger, that last clip there, Morgane Oger started by saying, well, if somebody staples a rat to the women's rape relief building, I condemn this. Well, that's a specific instance, okay? Mm-hmm. So what I've learned in my time in this debate, in my dealings with the media and in dealings with people like Morgane Oger, is they are liars, okay? They will misrepresent you, they will lie about you, and I know that they have lied about me, portraying me as a bigot and a hater and even a white supremacist. And it's all nonsense. So when I hear them doing this stuff about me, and then they tell me that the Soldiers of Odin are white supremacists and haters, I'm like, okay, so are they doing the same thing to the Soldiers of Odin that they're doing to me? So what I have said to people is that my dealings with Conrad Peach is, he's what we used to call a rough boy, okay? So he's the kind of guy you find in a biker bar, right? And so you got to handle these guys politely or they'll correct you, right? He's a rough boy. But for the most part, he's a very sort of, at least in my experience, is a very sort of amiable, humorous fellow, right? He just doesn't like these far left-wing activists and stuff, right? But I've told people, okay, so bring me something specific that I can condemn. Okay, so what people have tended to do so far is they bring me this stuff about the Soldiers of Odin in Finland, right? And I say, okay, that's the Soldiers of Odin in Finland, but the Soldiers of Odin Canada deliberately severed themselves from the Soldiers of Odin in Finland and said, we don't agree with anything they say, we don't support that, we want nothing to do with that. In fact, we would like them to drop the Soldiers of Odin label altogether because we don't support that. Okay, so they came out and made that statement that Morgane is asking for, right? Say, we repudiate what they say. So when they come to me with these Finland examples, I say, that's not, okay, that's been settled. Come to me with something from the Soldiers of Odin Canada, something that shows that they are white supremacists, like Morgane is claiming there. Incidentally, Conrad Peach's wife is an Asian, and he has mixed-race children. So, okay, he's a white supremacist, maybe, I guess, but bring me something that he has said, or someone else in the leadership of the Soldiers of Odin have said, that proves that they're all these terrible things that people say they are. So far, nobody has done that, and until they do, I will not repudiate them, and I specifically will not repudiate somebody who saved my equipment and kept me safe when the police basically abandoned me and fed me to the wolves. But if somebody brings me something racist for me to condemn, I will condemn that, because I'm totally opposed to racism. I believe actually that there's one race, the human race, and different characteristics and stuff.
Right. So going back to that Jenn Smith event, you mentioned that the incitement of violence is clearly the point of contention among the trans community when it came to that event. Now, when we checked Twitter to see how people had reacted to the event and how controversy had been generated, it was clear that perhaps when you suggested that Jenn Smith should not be allowed to speak at the university, when you suggested that Jenn Smith was a danger to society, it led to a number of groups to come to the university, including militant groups, to try and shut down the event and actually conduct real violence. So there must have been something wrong in that respect, because what had effectively happened when you tweeted out, Jenn Smith is a danger, Jenn Smith perpetrates hate speech, and this entire mob came.
Did I do that?
I mean,
I did not.
Okay, so let's get into that. So what did Morgane Oger, and broadly, like, what did activists say on the eve of your talk to at UBC?
So, like, pretty much across the board, people were saying I was a bigot and a hater and promoting the erasure of transgender people and stuff. So there was deliberate incitement to see me as this hateful bigot who was trying to erase trans people. And Morgane there is denying taking part in this before the event at UBC. And that, again, is an outright lie. So if we go to the screenshot that I have there, it's actually from a essay that Morgane Oger published on Oger's website about me and about the event at UBC. And if people take the time to look through this, you'll see that Morgane is referring to me and comparing me to racists and saying that I'm trying to incite hatred through disinformation, accusing transgender people of grooming children, and all of these inflammatory statements. So for Morgane to deny that that's what was going on is patently false. Furthermore, when you do stuff like this, and we saw this in the Oak Bay incident as well, you are the one who is assembling a mob. Okay, you're misrepresenting me, telling people that I'm a hater of trans people and I want to basically exterminate trans people. Of course people will get mad about that. Most people aren't going to do the research. They'll just take your word for it, especially if you've gotten the Governor General's Award like Morgane has.
So, like, going back to Jonathan Kay, in addressing Morgane Oger, had said that it is her role as an activist to raise this sort of commotion, to bring as much attention to this as possible. Is this within that sort of realm?
No, well, I mean, Morgane has already set the standard that if you're engaging in misinformation or disinformation, that's not acceptable. Okay, so that's what Morgane is doing here. So if Morgane wants to say that I've got bad arguments, right, so that my claims about the pharmaceutical industry, for instance, are invalid, well, then just illustrate that, right? Just go straight for those facts and stuff. But engaging in this hyperbole, saying that I'm a transphobe looking to erase transgender people and spread, like, deliberately incite hatred towards them. That's a strong claim, right? And there's a lot of simple people who turn up in these mobs, right, who don't read. They'll just take Morgane's word for it. So that is not what I would call fair play, okay? It's yes, as an activist, you have to get attention. So I've had people sort of criticize me, say, oh, Jen, you're just somebody who's looking for attention. It's like, yeah, I'm trying to affect public policy and trying to alert people to things. Yes, I need to get attention, but not, as Morgane has already said, at any cost. So I don't go and I don't tell deliberate lies about what Morgane is saying. That's not what Morgane does in terms of referring to me.
Let's discuss the VPS, the Vancouver Pride Society's reaction to the Jenn Smith event. This is a quote from the VP of Students, Ainsley Carey, when he said
at
UBC, in reference to the reaction to the Jenn Smith event. UBC does 99 things to make this place safe, accommodating, inclusive, diverse. And then one speaker comes and all of that goes out the window. All right. So did the Vancouver Pride Society make the right decision when they decided to exclude or ban the University of British Columbia from its event?
I absolutely applaud Vancouver Pride Society for excluding UBC. For a number of reasons, including that they allowed someone to come to their campus and speak on supremacist grounds and incite discrimination and hatred against a community that their community includes members of.
Go for it.
supremacist grounds. Okay, so what on earth is Morgane talking about? What does Morgane mean, supremacist grounds? I don't do any such thing. In terms of the Pride Society and their reaction, I would say that with the Pride Society it was inexcusable. First of all, I've already said this, and whether or not I'm going to take legal action or not is unclear, but the Pride Society lied about me. Okay, they came out and made some of these defamatory claims that I'm deliberately spreading hatred of transgender people and stuff. And I actually went to the Pride Parade to protest that, and I walked through the crowded streets with a sign calling the Pride Society liars, right? So that's how strongly I feel about that. But there's a hypocrisy there. I mean, probably the preeminent supporter of LGBTQ rights in British Columbia in the academic community is the University of British Columbia. That, like the UBC, is the center of where SOGI 1, 2, 3 materials and stuff are being developed and discussed and stuff. So they are one of the great supporters of LGBT rights in British Columbia. And for the Pride Society to just sort of, abandon them because they have a dedications, more or less a dedication to free speech, right, is inexcusable. Like, talk about stabbing an ally in the back.
Well, it's just like Ainsley Carey had said. It's UBC is possibly like one of the most inclusive places in the Lower Mainland. Absolutely. And to ban it as an institution just seems a little bit overzealous, and maybe taking an all or nothing sort of strategy in order to pressure the university. That was our take on it, at least.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So it's an all or nothing. So you will either submit to what we are decreeing absolutely 100%, or you are out. And I've seen that myself as somebody who's a member, so bisexual, transgender identified, formally sort of considered myself a member of the community, but because I don't want children being medically transitioned, and because I think that women's rights should be respected, that goes against the prevailing orthodoxy, so I'm out. So they've basically cast me out. So it's hard for me to even relate to the community anymore because I've been so ostracized. But that's sort of, and that is a cult-like psychology, right? So cults have this thing where you have to accept the dogma in its entirety, and if you don't, you are gone. Right? So that's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned.